Welcome to Casual Conversations, brought to you by Momentum Ministries, helping you attain, maintain, and regain spiritual momentum. Let's join the conversation with Scott Wade, president of Momentum Ministries.
Welcome to Casual Conversations. I'm glad that you're on with us today, that you've made us part of your day. This is a ministry of Momentum Ministries, and Momentum is a 501c3 corporation that exists to help you maintain, attain, and regain spiritual momentum. Do a lot of things with that. I write books, I preach, and I'm an evangelist in the Church of the Nazarene. I visit churches, speak at conferences, workshops, whatever. But also I have a podcast. It's called Casual Conversations, as you could guess. And we have a returning guest with us today, Reverend Jeremy Reese. Hey, Jeremy. Good to see you.
Hey, Scott. How we doing?
I'm good, man. Thanks for making some more time to be on with us. I just want to get right into this. You introduced yourself a few weeks ago, but Jeremy is the Assistant District Superintendent, South Carolina District Church of the Nazarene, head pastor, lead pastor at Ebenezer Church of the Nazarene in Aiken. What a great story that was to tell us how God put all that together. And that was just phenomenal. And Jeremy also had worked for me and for Momentum Ministries to help me kind of get off on the right foot with podcast videos, anything technical. Man, I wore your phone out and your email and all that kind of stuff. But thank you so much for being a part of Momentum's journey too. Last time we were together, you said something right at the end that I want to go back to, and I want you to kind of fill this out. You said that what you would say to people listening about what God did at Ebenezer Church of the Nazarene in Aiken, South Carolina, what you would say to people is when you say yes, you need to realize it's not just a once and done thing, but yes means yes now. You make a commitment, consecration, give your life to God or follow him in a ministry or whatever. But then you have this continuing yes. I think you called it a day by day yes.
Yeah.
And it reminded me, of course, of the scripture. Jesus said, if anyone would come after me, let him take up his cross and lay down his life and take up his cross and follow me daily. So I want you to kind of encourage us today with how we can do that. Maybe some stories from your own life of what that meant to you. You shared with me after we recorded our last session that Aiken Ebenezer, you're coming up on a time that this will be your longest ministry assignment. You've had a lot of different places that you've served and a lot of different impact that you've had. So you were a college administrator, I think you said, at the age of 19. Let's just go back there and talk about how your yeses to God led you up until the time you became the pastor at Aiken Ebenezer.
Yeah. So I want to kind of give a little bit of a background. So last time we talked about my sister, how she works for you. So we grew up in the Evangelical Methodist Church. My grandfather was a district superintendent, the first full-time district superintendent in the EMC. And so I grew up going to church. My parents took me to church. Right the summer before my sixth grade year in school, my parents separated and eventually divorced, and I didn't recognize it until much later, but I felt a lot of that, and a lot of that weight kind of stayed there, and I got pretty upset and pretty angry, and a lot of times I would blame God. And so I ended up kind of leaving this faith that had raised me. Didn't mean I didn't go to church. Occasionally I would, things like that. Like I was still a kid. I was a teenager. And so 11th grade year of school, I am chasing a girl, and she invites me to a Fellowship of Christian Athletes meeting after school. I am not athletic, by the way. Never was. It just is what it is. And so I went because it was just this Bible study. Well, Scott, she didn't show up. She wasn't there. So I'm stuck
Bummer,
in
dude.
this. I know. I'm stuck in this FCA meeting. The only reason I'm there is because this girl invited me. And then in the middle of it, the guy that's leading it, he was a senior at the school, and he began speaking, and I started to just believe that he was speaking directly to me. And so I had no idea what to do with this. So I went home and I kind of did what they did in the movies, and I knelt by my bed and asked Jesus to come into my life. I had always said that I had followed Jesus since I was 5 years old, but that was the point at which I believe that Christ took hold of my life. And that summer, I surrendered my life to Him. Just said yes to a calling to ministry. Not sure where that was going to be.
All in this
And
moment that you're talking about, or this summer?
so during the summer, I was at teen camp that
Okay.
summer, and I actually worked at this campground because my grandfather was the caretaker, and so I usually didn't go to the services. But that summer, there was one night that I ended up at one of the services, and God called me into ministry there. But as you know, Scott, a lot of times when God calls you into something, He doesn't exactly hone that calling in and tell you exactly where that's going to be. And I think that's been for good reason, because that calling has played out in a lot of different ways over the last several years. And so I began the minister's licensing process when I was senior in high school, going into college. Went to Bible college, John Wesley College in High Point, North Carolina, and small school, 75 students. My sophomore year there, I got a youth ministry position at a Nazarene church. So that was the beginning of the end for me, Scott. And got a youth ministry position there, but I was also doing work study in the admissions department. And one day I got a phone call from my admissions director, and she said, "Hey, when you get here tomorrow, I'm not going to be here. I'm packing up my office and I'm done." So
First you'd heard of it?
First time I had heard anything. And so I went the next day, and her office was cleared out, and everybody was going a little crazy.
Yeah.
And I'm 19 at the time. I walk into the president's office and I said, "Hey, I know how to handle most of what needs to be done. Give me a few extra hours, and I'll handle it until you find somebody." So that was February. And in June, they came to me and they said, "We like what you're doing. We'd like to offer you this full time."
Wow.
And
Sounds like your district position here. And it also
yeah,
sounds like your experience with Aiken Ebenezer. I'm just going to do this part-time or do this for a while, but God had another plan.
yeah. And so I did, and I stayed there for 4 years. And in the midst of that, my wife was actually my first recruit. And so I had to change up my method after that, Scott, because I couldn't recruit that way anymore.
There you go.
Had to get the sign off from everybody at the school before we started dating, and all of that. But spent a few years there in the admissions department. The school just exploded. By the time I left, we had gone from 75 students to about 750 total.
Wow.
And about 450 full time. And so massive expansion. We had gone to a second campus too. It was a lot happening. And I was actually on a mission trip with my wife. We were in Colombia, in Medellin, Colombia, and we were there with a some missionaries from one mission society. And while we were there, my wife, she had this long calling to serve in another country, to serve in missions, and I did not have that. Or at least I didn't feel like that was where my calling was. She was the one that actually got me on a plane for the first time, really. And so we're in Colombia, and the missionaries tell us, they said, hey, we want you to go to different places on the seminary campus, and we want you to just take some time, just talk to God and just wait for him to speak. And so I go and find my own little place, and I'd been wrestling with kind of this back and forth of where that next yes was going to be. And so I just asked God, I said, hey, what do you want us to do? Where would you have us?
So at this point, you are still working for John Wesley and
Still working,
part-time as a youth pastor for.
So youth ministry position had to go away
Okay, I got you. All right.
after I got that full-time role. So I was speaking occasionally at some churches and things like that, but my primary role was at the university. And so we're on this campus, and I asked God, I said, what do you want for us? And audibly, God said to go. And I remember it so clearly because I looked around me to see who was talking. And I think it was those missionaries that told us that we needed to go somewhere separate because God had something individually for each of us. And so I remember when my wife came back and we're back together, I just told her, I said, okay. I said, wherever we need to go, that's where we're going. And God had been speaking to her as well. So we get back and we start completing all the paperwork for doing missionary work with One Mission Society. And we're filling out this application, and I called the recruiter there at OMS, and I said, hey, I'm trying to put down where exactly we feel like we're supposed to serve, and I have no idea. I don't know what in the world we're supposed to do. And so he began talking to me about Spain. And so I get off the phone and I call my wife and I said, hey, I just got off the phone with Paul. And I have something I want to tell you. And she said, hang on. She said, before you say anything, she said, I don't know what it is, but for some reason, Spain has really been on my heart today. And so I told her about my conversation, and that's what put us on that track. So we go to the headquarters a couple months later, and the people there, they're asking us, like, what are some of the things that you'd like to do while you're serving in Spain? And I had been in student ministry. I said, I'd love to continue in student ministry. My wife was getting a bachelor's with a certificate in teaching English as a second language. So we'd love to minister in English. Well, come to find out, they had a church planners conference the week before that. And they had a team from Spain that was there. And as they were getting ready to finish out this church planners conference, they asked them all for prayer requests. And the team from Spain, they said, we want to pray that there is a young missionary couple that would come and do student ministry and teach English.
Whoa. That's phenomenal.
And so that's how we ended up in just outside of Madrid, this little town of El Escorial, and ended up doing church planting there and serving alongside that same team. And we did that for 3 years. Our daughter was born in Spain, had just a beautiful time in ministry there. And so we saw God at work. We were able to, we actually planted a church in our own home with college students. And it's so funny. If you've seen European apartments, ours was the smallest of them. And so I remember one of our last church services. And I mean, we had upwards of 25 people stacked in this apartment, doing worship, all of this just around on couches and tables, and it was beautiful and wild all at the same time. But while we were there, our daughter was born, and my wife, she had actually started experiencing postpartum depression after our daughter was born. But we're in a different country. People, nobody's speaking our heart language, all of that, and so it was undiagnosed for quite a while. And that actually, we talk about my yes, that actually determined her next yes. And she went into missionary care and was able to care for missionaries in Europe, and then eventually started a master's degree in mental clinical health counseling. And so she's a mental health therapist now and has her own practice. And it all began because of her own journey, walking through that and seeing how our God's faithful in the midst of it.
Early in my ministry, I had a preacher friend. He was actually a mentor. His name was Blanchard Horn. And Reverend Horn and I used to joke around about this comment that he made to me one time, this truism. He said, "He that tooteth not his own horn, it be not tooted." And so he tooted his own horn as in his name, but sometimes I like to toot my own horn too. I want to do that a little bit with my preaching ministry. I know that a lot of what you see is on the podcast. You hear about the books, but also I'm a traveling evangelist for the Church of the Nazarene. And I go from churches to churches. And so if you know of anybody, or you and your church would like to have an evangelist, a revival, or even just a special Sunday where we emphasize renewal for the church, I'd love to hear from you and be a part of the story of God where you are and where you worship. And so if you'd keep that in mind, pray for me too. And also, you can go on my website and find a link for giving. A lot of the churches that I go to are smaller, and they can't really afford the expense of a revival. But I never let that stop me. I'll go anywhere that I'm called and where the Lord leads. And so I depend on generous giving from other people to make it possible for me to go to those churches. A lot of the churches are very generous, and some just can't be. But I want to go and proclaim the gospel of Jesus Christ. So if you don't mind going on the website, check out our giving link and be a partner with us in that way as well. God bless you. Thank you for praying for Momentum Ministries. How'd you get from the crowded apartment, one of your last services, I think is what you indicated, in Spain to Jasper? You didn't
To
tell.
Jasper,
I think
Alabama.
I'm calling that from my own memory. You hadn't said it yet. How'd you? You ended up in Jasper, but you
Yeah.
didn't just walk out of that service and go, did you?
No. So we knew that our time was coming to an end, not because necessarily anything was wrong. It was more because we felt like we were at the place where we could work ourselves out of a job. And so we actually did some time of traveling and praying and trying to seek out if God was leading us to another part of Spain, to another part of Europe, and all those doors, they never seemed like they were opening. And God wasn't really speaking to us in that way. And I'm probably one of the few that actually got a position on the Nazarene job board at the time. And so I was interviewing with different churches. I actually interviewed with a non-denominational church at that point, and it was so funny. We were on one of those. It was our daughter's 1-year birthday, and we were in Munich, Germany. And we had gotten this cheap little apartment. It was a studio apartment to stay at in Munich, Germany. And I get this email saying my interview is scheduled. Well, I didn't know that this interview was going to happen. I didn't bring clothes for an interview. We were in a studio apartment with a 1-year-old. So I ended up doing this interview with this church in the bathroom, sitting on the toilet.
The non-denominational church or the
The non-denominational church. And the guy actually asked me, he said, hey, before I get on this, are you actually sitting in a bathroom right now? So I said,
Yep.
let me just tell you the story. And
Uh,
so those doors kept closing too, and I got connected with the lead pastor there in Jasper, Alabama, and God was just working the pieces together. And so we took a student ministry position there, and that turned our lives in a whole different trajectory. But still believing that we were continuing to walk in that obedience of what God was calling us to. And so had beautiful ministry in Alabama, but probably one of the things that was the most beautiful about it was how our family was formed during that time. Um, so we had gone from this small European apartment to now we were in a parsonage with 4 bedrooms. And it, when I say that we literally blocked off doors and kept them locked so people couldn't go in there because we didn't have enough furniture. We had moved from Europe. We didn't have anything. We did one IKEA shipment when we got there, furnished our bedroom, our daughter's room, and one of the living rooms because they had a full den family room, and we called that our dance hall studio for a while because there was nothing in there. And so we started talking, and we said, we had been talking about fostering for a while, but it was never an option. And so we had this house where we had so much space and so much opportunity. So we began that journey. And our 10-year-old, now 10-year-old, he was 2.5 at the time, Nathan, was our first placement. And oh man, he was wild straight from the get-go. And so we ended up fostering him. It was November, and then that March afterwards, we're going to a visit with his mom, with his biological mom. My wife is, and the mom had missed the week before. And so we found out that she was in the hospital. And so my wife's asking her, hey, is everything okay? I heard you were in the hospital. And she said, yeah. She said, I had a baby.
oh,
We had no idea she was pregnant. And so Melissa calls the caseworker and says, did you know about this? And she said, we just found out. Will you take him? And it's so funny because we recall this differently, Melissa and I do. I recall that she said yes on the phone with the caseworker and then called me and said, should I have said yes before talking to you? And I'm like, yes, it's fine. Now she says it's the other way around. Well, that's fine. It'll go down in history of whatever it's going to be. But either way, we said yes to taking this child. Born 5 weeks early, had 2 club feet, had emergency surgery on the night he was born because he had an intestinal obstruction. And so we go, and it is this tiny little baby there at the hospital. And so he comes home with us 5 weeks later. And so continue that journey. We look towards adoption, and then COVID hits. And what's so wild is our next adventure of life happens in the middle of that. The day that Alabama's governor shuts down schools for COVID was the day that we confirmed the pregnancy with our youngest child. And so fast forward to October of 2020, and we have a hearing date for the adoption set for October 23rd. And Shepherd, our youngest, is supposed to be born in November. And October 22nd, family's on their way in. And I'm sitting in line to pick up our kids. And my wife calls and she said, we need to go to the hospital. My water just broke. So we end up at the hospital that night. Shepard's born. The next morning, we adopt our two boys, Nathan and Zeke, over Zoom from the hospital with the judge in his quarters, with our lawyer, our kids at home with family, and us in the hospital with Shepard. And only year that you could do that was in 2020. And so we had posted out pictures of Shepard, being born. And then the next day, because when you're in that foster care process, you can't post pictures of the kids. So the next day we had done full family photos without Shepard, but had done, so I posted those out, and I had so many people asking me, like, what is happening in your life, Jeremy? So overnight we went from one kid to four, really. And
Wow.
From a family of three officially to a family of six. And that was wild and
You,
beautiful.
I guess you can relate to the Israelites when God told them that when they were wandering. So when the cloud lifts, you need to move, and the cloud
Need
lifted,
to
didn't
move.
it?
Need to move. Yep.
Okay, there's six of us now.
And there was definitely, it was an adventure. And so then, we began praying and seeking what was next. And um, I had a couple of interviews with some churches in 2021. Got pretty far with a couple of them, and ended up just kind of not working out. Different places, Ohio and some other places. And so I remember I'm on the phone with the district superintendent for South Carolina, and talking to him about church possibilities for lead pastor position. And he just changes the conversation, and he said, "Hey, I need somebody in the office. It looks like you've got some admin in your background, and what would you think of working for me?" And so that was a whole different thing.
Cloud lifting.
I mean, it just, so we made our last move to South Carolina, and it has been one of our most beautiful seasons of ministry. And we have loved it. God has been faithful and has provided. You talked about Aiken, Ebenezer. That was another aspect of this part of our ministry journey, and just seeing how God has brought us all the way from uh, John Wesley College and being together there to Spain, to Alabama, and now to South Carolina, and just seeing his hand just at work throughout all of that.
And I can say from a personal level, I'm so glad that you said yes to God when the cloud lifted. And also as a member of the South Carolina Nazarene team, grateful
Yep.
for your ministry, your spirit of obedience and yes to God. We are in a time here on Casual Conversations that I'm calling it not New Year's resolutions, but New Year's solutions. And so I'm thinking about as we conclude today, how would you relate your story to a solution for how people can live in 2026?
So, one of the things that I started doing at the church a couple years ago was I started doing New Year's resolutions for the church. So for this year, this is what our resolution is going to be. And I know we're recording this in 2025, and so I'm not going to reveal what the 2026 resolution is, but I'll share. The 2025 resolution was to expect more, and in that, just believing that God is able to do abundantly and exceedingly more than we can ask or imagine. And so, in that, expect that God's going to do more. Expect to see him work in miraculous ways. Expect that, if he's not yelling something at you, it's okay to keep moving and to keep moving forward. Like we've said throughout this whole thing, take that next yes, take that next step of obedience, and he's going to tell you.
Yeah.
If it's not the right one, I mean, you can always take steps in other directions, but keep moving forward in expectation that our God is faithful.
Expect more. This yes is going to lead to another yes, to another yes, to another yes. I had a minister tell me one time that, or asked me, he said, you know what answer to prayer is, don't you? No, what? He said, it's an invitation to more faith. So when you say yes to God in obedience and in faith, and God leads you, it's an indication there's going to be more yeses in your future. So, Jeremy,
Absolutely.
thank you so much for sharing, opening up, and letting us getting a glimpse into the life and heart of a man of God, and into your family too. You let Melissa know I appreciate her
Absolutely.
sharing through you in this story as well. Before we go, though, I want to say a prayer for you, for your church, and for our listeners.
Absolutely.
Father God, I thank you today for Pastor Jeremy, for Dad Jeremy, husband Jeremy, and friend Jeremy. You have blessed him and you have blessed through him. I think of what you said to Abraham, I will bless you and I will make you a blessing. And Abraham said yes, and you did just that. And Jeremy has said yes, and you've done that for him as well. So, Lord, I pray that as he continues to say yes, you would continue to bless him and through him, his wife, his children. And Lord, those who are listening, may you bless them in this new year to continue to move from yes to yes to yes. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen.
Well, thank you very much, Jeremy. I appreciate you
No,
being
thank you.
on. And thanks to our listeners for making casual conversations a part of your day. God bless you.
Thanks for listening in on Casual Conversations by Momentum Ministries. Check out our website at momentumministries.org, where you will find books and other resources to help you attain, maintain, and regain spiritual momentum. God bless you and have a great day.